A black man like you? Speaks 9 languages? Rose raised an eyebrow, her voice dipped in amusement. Yes, Marcus replied calmly, and I can prove it. His tone was even, but his eyes were sharp like a blade honed not in arrogance, but survival. The conference room fell into momentary silence. You could almost hear the air conditioning hum above the glass walls. Rose Hamilton leaned back in her leather chair, crossing her arms as if settling in for a show. She wasn't the kind of woman easily impressed, especially not by someone like Marcus. Her suit was flawless, ivory white, like the polished veneer of her reputation. And in her eyes, behind the lashes and poise, there was something cold, measured. Marcus stood near the door, holding a worn leather briefcase and wearing a charcoal jacket that had seen better days. He didn't fit the mold. Not for the 35th floor of one of Chicago's most powerful media corporations. Not for an executive-level development interview surrounded by Ivy League graduates and Rolex timepieces. Not for this room. But he was here anyway. That morning, he had walked from the South Side to the Loop, not because he couldn't afford the train fare, but because it cleared his mind. He needed that walk. Needed the weight of the city beneath his feet. Needed to remind himself that though he no longer wore the clean lines of tailored suits or spoke from behind podiums in Geneva, Brussels, and Nairobi, he still carried everything he'd earned. And no one, no boardroom, no CEO was going to strip that away with a smirk. He looked around the room. 8 other candidates sat at the polished oval table. They had the right look, expensive watches, cufflinks, fresh fades, and surnames that rang in corporate circles. Not one of them had his skin tone. Not one of them had grown up dodging broken glass and boarded up liquor stores. One of the younger men laughed under his breath, nudging the guy beside him. Must be counting emoji as a language. Another added, let's see if he can order a croissant in French, real slow, with subtitles. Marcus had heard worse. His skin was thick, but thick didn't mean numb. Thick meant choosing, moment by moment, not to let the insult take root. He moved to an empty seat, slow and deliberate, placing his briefcase on the floor like it contained gold, and in a way, it did. Inside was a faded letter of recommendation from a former UN diplomat. It had crossed oceans with him. Rose's smile didn't reach her eyes. Well, Mr. Young, she said, folding her hands. I hope your resume is as impressive as your claims. Marcus held her gaze. That depends. Are you looking for novelty or value? The room stiffened. A beat of silence passed. Then another. Rose broke it with a light laugh. Fair enough, she said. Let's begin. But before she could move on, a janitor pushing a water cart entered quietly from the hallway. His gray uniform was faded, and he moved with the caution of a man trying not to be noticed. He paused when he saw Marcus, eyes lighting up. You helped me once, the man said softly. My wife at the hospital. You translated for the nurse. Spanish, then German. Then, was it Swahili? Marcus offered a small nod. Swahili. Her sister called from Nairobi. Now the room was still for a different reason. Something had shifted not drastically, but like the subtle tightening of a string. Rose blinked. She looked down at Marcus' resume again, this time slower. Would you be willing, she said, tone quieter now, to demonstrate? Marcus paused. A long breath passed between the question and his reply. Ma'am, he said, with all due respect, I'm not here to perform. I'm here to lead. Someone shifted uncomfortably in their chair. A woman near the end of the table glanced toward Rose, unsure what to do next. But Rose wasn't smiling now. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. And that, she said, might be the most executive thing anyone's said all morning. Marcus didn't flinch. I'm ready to proceed, he said. And this time, when he looked around the room, no one laughed. The air inside the room was still charged with the aftershock of Marcus's response. I'm here to lead. He hadn't raised his voice. He didn't need to. The weight of those words, delivered with quiet confidence, had landed with more force than if he'd shouted them. Rose sat back slowly in her chair, studying him now not as an amusement, not even as an anomaly, but as a variable she hadn't accounted for. That alone shifted the balance in the room. One of the assistants entered with a tray of coffee and passed cups around. The candidates murmured soft thank yous, returning to their best business postures. But Marcus noticed how some glanced at him more frequently now, not with contempt, not yet with respect, but with curiosity. The kind that flickers when someone realizes the story might not go the way they assumed. Rose cleared her throat. "Let's continue," she said, her voice smooth but not as dismissive as before. "We'll move into scenario-based analysis. You'll each be given a mock crisis, and we want to hear your strategy, language fluency included, if applicable. You'll present in front of the panel our media execs, legal heads, and global operations team." She gestured to the adjoining glass door, revealing a long hallway beyond. "We'll go one at a time." The first candidate, Gregory, tall, confident, hair combed like a senator's son, stood and followed the assistant through the door. As the rest of the room settled into silence, Marcus felt his phone vibrate faintly in his pocket. He ignored it. It was likely the hospital, calling again to settle bills long overdue. The money he had left was enough for 1 month's rent and groceries. This interview wasn't just another shot at a career. It was the only door left before the lights went out for good. From where he sat, he could see his reflection in the glass walls, an older black man in a room built to exclude him, sitting at a table he wasn't meant to touch. Yet here he was, not just touching it but slowly reshaping the conversation without ever raising his voice. His eyes drifted to Rose again. She was typing something into her sleek laptop. He wondered what she thought now. Did she see a leader or still a gamble? Gregory returned 10 minutes later, confident and smiling. A few chuckles between him and another candidate hinted at some shared business school past. The assistant called the next name. One by one, they vanished behind the door and returned with practiced charm and easy jokes. When Marcus's name was finally called, he stood slowly, nodding once to the room. No swagger, no apologies. He entered a new room, this one darker, more formal. Around a U-shaped table sat 6 individuals, all clearly senior. One was a legal advisor, another from global marketing, 2 from finance, and one, an older gentleman in a worn tweed jacket, stood out as someone whose opinion mattered deeply. Rose entered behind Marcus and took her seat at the end. A woman on the left cleared her throat. "Mr. Young, your scenario. Our East African division is facing backlash after a miscommunication regarding a political ad. The region is multilingual. Local activists have begun protests. You are our regional executive. How do you respond within 24 hours internally and publicly?" Marcus didn't blink. "What languages are we working with?" he asked. "Swahili, Somali, and a French-speaking minority." Marcus nodded once. "May I stand?" They gave him a look, half surprise, half intrigue, then nodded. He walked to the whiteboard, picked up a marker, and began outlining. "First, acknowledge the mistake, immediately, in all 3 languages, not a generic PR line, a real apology, clear, human." He turned to them. "Second, direct engagement. Identify the key local radio stations, community leaders, religious figures. We bring in a delegation that speaks to them in their language, not English with a translator. Face to face, respect." He paused. "Third, we commit to representation, not tomorrow, today. Hire 3 new media managers from the region, fluent. Give them power, not tokens. Show, don't spin." The room was still. Marcus continued, switching smoothly into French. "Nous vous avons entendus. Nous comprenons votre colère. Et nous sommes prêts à réparer." Then, without missing a beat, in Swahili, "Tunawa tulikozea, tunaomba masamaha, tuko tayari kushirikiana tena." Then in soft Somali, careful and fluid, offering the key words of reconciliation and accountability. When he stopped, there was no applause, just silence. The good kind. The kind when people stop pretending they know more than they do. The woman from legal leaned forward. "And if corporate says that's too many resources for one region?" Marcus looked at her, steady. "Then corporate doesn't understand the cost of a broken reputation. Trust is currency. You lose it there, you bleed it everywhere." The man in the tweed jacket smiled faintly. Rose, however, showed no emotion. She simply clicked her pen and said, "Thank you, Mr. Young." As he walked back into the waiting area, the atmosphere had shifted again. A few heads turned as he entered. The smirks were gone. The jokes had stopped. He took his seat without a word. One of the other candidates leaned toward him after a minute. "So, you really do speak all those languages?" Marcus turned his head slowly. "I speak what people need to hear, in the way they need to hear it." Then he leaned back, closed his eyes for a brief moment, and waited. Not to be accepted, but to be remembered. The hours passed like molasses under fluorescent lights. One by one, the candidates filtered out of the interview rooms and into silence. No one dared to ask how the others had done. Every nod, every glance carried an undercurrent of competition. Marcus remained quiet, his fingers loosely interlaced on his lap, but his mind churned with a quiet intensity. He had laid down everything he had in that presentation, his intellect, his integrity, his identity, and now, all that remained was the waiting. At nearly 4 o'clock, Rose emerged from the glass doors, heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. She didn't address the group. Instead, she scanned the room and called, "Mr. Young, a moment, please." A few murmurs followed as Marcus stood, calmly gathered his briefcase, and followed her back into the conference room. This time, it was empty. Just the two of them. The blinds were half closed now, and the skyline of downtown Chicago glowed orange with the fading sun. Rose walked to the far end of the room and poured herself a glass of water, then gestured toward the chair across from her. Marcus sat without comment. She watched him for a long moment. Not the way she had earlier, measuring, calculating, but now, with something closer to curiosity or caution. "You caught the panel off guard," she said eventually. "In a good way, I hope. In a way that makes them uneasy," she replied, setting the glass down. "They don't know what to do with someone like you." "You mean someone qualified?" he said with no heat in his voice. "I mean someone they didn't see coming," she corrected, narrowing her eyes slightly. "You broke the rhythm. They're used to polished resumes, clean narratives, predictable ambition. You've lived a real life. That scares them." Marcus gave a slight nod. "It's not the first time I've made people uncomfortable just by existing in a place they didn't expect me." "It's not about race," she said quickly. "Too quickly, isn't it?" he asked, voice low. "Because it always is, eventually. It's about what people see or choose not to. I walk into a room, and before I say a word, I'm either someone's charity project or someone's threat. Rarely ever just potential." Rose's eyes flickered, not defensively, just momentarily unsettled, as if a small window had opened that let in a draft she wasn't used to. "Let me ask you something," she said, shifting tone. "Why are you really here, Mr. Young? You don't need this program. You've done more in your previous life than half these candidates will do in 20 years. You could be running your own consultancy, teaching, advising. Why come back into this world?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Because I'm tired of being useful only when convenient. Tired of whispering truths so others can take credit. I want to be in the room where decisions are made, and I want people like me to stop being the exception." Rose leaned forward slowly. "You want to change the system?" "I want to force it to acknowledge its own hypocrisy," he said, eyes steady. "And if I have to do it from the inside, one room at a time, so be it." There was a long pause. Then Rose nodded once. "There's an evening panel in an hour. Investors, some press. Normally, only senior executives attend, but we're short one today. I'd like you to join me, as my guest." Marcus's brows lifted slightly, surprised not by the offer but by the speed of it. "To what end?" "Consider it a field test, a chance to see how you navigate an audience that won't be as polite as our panel. And to be honest," she added, her voice lowering just a notch, "I want to see if your presence rattles them as much as it did in there." Marcus waited silently. There was risk, but there was also clarity. This wasn't about opportunity anymore. This was about control, about reclaiming the narrative before someone else twisted it. He stood. "All right," he said, "let's rattle them." An hour later, he stood beside Rose in a sleek rooftop ballroom, lit by golden chandeliers and the soft murmur of old money. The guests were mostly men in tailored suits, women in understated couture, champagne flutes delicately cradled in hands that hadn't worked an honest shift in years. As they entered, several heads turned. Rose in her impeccable suit was expected. Marcus, in his outdated blazer and steady stride, was not. He caught snippets of conversation. "Is he press? Security, maybe?" "No, he's with Rose," and felt them like sparks against old scars. She led him to a small high table near the bar, handed him a drink, and leaned in. "They'll come to us. Watch how they play it." It didn't take long. A man with silver hair and a Texas drawl approached, wearing a smile too wide to be real. "Rose, darling, who's your guest?" "This is Marcus Young," she said, not elaborating. The man turned, offering a hand. "Pleasure. Marcus, what's your background?" "Linguistics, international negotiation, conflict mediation," Marcus said easily. "And janitorial services, when the world stopped caring." The man blinked, uncertain if it was a joke. Rose smirked behind her glass. "Marcus is a candidate in our leadership program," she added. "One of the strongest, if not the most, unexpected." "Well," the man said slowly, "we need more surprises in this industry. Keeps things fresh." He laughed, and Marcus gave a polite smile that didn't touch his eyes. The next hour was a blur of surface conversations, passive-aggressive curiosity, and enough veiled racism to fill a handbook. Marcus handled each exchange with poise, never lowering his gaze, never backing away. Every time someone underestimated him, he met it with quiet precision. He wasn't there to impress. He was there to endure, to observe, to make them remember the name they had scoffed at earlier that day. Later, as the crowd thinned, Rose stepped beside him again. "Well?" she asked. "They stared," he said. Then they swallowed their questions. "You gave them no easy box to put you in," she replied. "That unsettles them. Good." He finished his drink and looked out over the Chicago skyline, lights blinking like distant signals in the dark. "Let's hope that unsettling becomes unforgettable." Rose glanced at him. "It already has." The next morning, Marcus stood in front of the mirror in his small apartment on the south side, adjusting the collar of the only pressed shirt he owned. The buttons were slightly mismatched, one lower thread fraying near the hem, but it was clean, crisp, and dignified. He stared at his reflection longer than usual, not out of vanity but because of what was beginning to stir behind his eyes. There was movement now, something that felt like possibility, but it wasn't soft or romantic. It was edged with suspicion, because in his life, opportunity rarely came without a price, and kindness, especially from someone in Rose Hamilton's position, was never just kindness. Still, he buttoned up, picked up his briefcase, and left. Downtown buzzed with early traffic and the low hum of ambition. Marcus walked past polished shoes and sleek cars, the rhythm of the city a strange contradiction, familiar yet foreign. He passed through the revolving glass doors of Hamilton Global and nodded to the receptionist, who now greeted him with a cautious, "Good morning, sir," no longer mistaking him for building staff. On the 35th floor, he was ushered into a smaller meeting room this time. No skyline, just a whiteboard, a screen, and a half-circle of chairs. Rose was already there, flipping through a folder. She glanced up when he entered. "Marcus, Rose." No formality, just a name, spoken evenly. She gestured to the seat beside her. "Today's the deep dive. You and the final 3 candidates have to work as a team. Real-world crisis simulation, 3 hours to plan a response and deliver a joint solution. You'll be observed, but not guided." He nodded once, unsurprised. "And the twist?" She tilted her head, mildly amused. "You think there's a twist?" "There's always a twist," he replied, "especially when power's watching." She said nothing but didn't deny it. The other 3 candidates entered moments later. Gregory, still smooth and polished. Elena, the only other woman, sharp and quietly competitive. And Josh, the youngest, all nerves and overcompensation. They all acknowledged Marcus this time, but with that wary professionalism people use when they're still unsure whether to see you as a threat or an anomaly. The screen flickered on. A voiceover laid out the scenario. A partner company in Southeast Asia had been exposed in a child labor scandal. Images had leaked. Protesters had gathered in front of U.S. offices. Media pressure was mounting. The board wanted a plan immediate, strategic, and publicly presentable. As the video ended, the room shifted into tension. Josh immediately opened his laptop, fingers flying. "Let's break into tasks. Someone draft the statement. Someone map out stakeholder risks." "Slow down," Marcus said. "We don't even know who our audience is yet." Gregory cut in. "We know exactly who the audience is. Shareholders, press, damage control." Marcus turned to him. "Wrong. The audience is the kid in the photo, the mother who just lost her job protesting this. If we speak only to shareholders, we've already failed." Elena looked between them, frowning. "But we can't lose the investors either." "And we won't," Marcus said. "If we're honest, decisive, and human, we don't bury this, we own it. We lead with remorse, follow with reform." Gregory scoffed lightly. Idealism doesn't move stock prices. No, Marcus replied, but trust does. And right now, we don't have any. For 2 hours, the team debated, argued, restructured. Marcus listened more than he spoke, but when he did, the room shifted. Even Gregory, who clearly didn't like being outshined, eventually leaned in. Marcus outlined a plan that centered on community reparations, transparent audits, and a multilingual campaign of public responsibility. At one point, he pulled up an old file on his flash drive, an actual media response he'd written for a similar situation in Ghana years ago. This worked once, he said, projecting the document. It wasn't perfect, but it kept a community intact while holding a corporation accountable. The others were quiet, not out of disagreement, but because they had nothing to counter with. They simply hadn't lived that kind of experience. At the 3-hour mark, Rose returned with 2 senior observers. The group presented. Elena took lead on delivery, Gregory followed with risk mitigation, and Josh summarized social media strategy. Marcus closed. He stood at the front of the room, hands steady, eyes focused. Leadership, he said, is not measured in how fast you patch a leak. It's measured in whether the people on the other side of that leak believe you care about what spilled. We've crafted a plan that doesn't just cover our reputation. It acknowledges the harm, centers those affected, and creates mechanisms to prevent recurrence. That's not optics. That's accountability. And that's what we owe the world if we want to keep calling ourselves a global company. The room held still. No one clapped, but no one needed to. As they exited, Gregory slowed beside Marcus. For the first time, his tone was flat but not dismissive. That Ghana plan? That was real? Yes, Marcus said. You ever wonder why a guy with your background is in this program instead of leading it? Marcus didn't blink. I stopped wondering the day I realized the system wasn't broken. It was built this way. Gregory exhaled through his nose, half a laugh, half a sigh. Maybe we ought to break it then. Marcus gave a faint nod. Maybe we should. How? Later, as the sun dipped behind the skyline once again, Marcus found himself walking toward the elevators alone. Rose caught up. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. That plan was better than what some of our real executives have proposed in actual crises. That's because I've seen real crises, Marcus said. She paused. I want to ask you something off record. Go ahead. Did you know this scenario was based on a real incident from one of our partners? He looked at her. I figured. The details were too sharp to be hypothetical. She nodded. The board didn't approve the community-based approach last time, said it wasn't scalable. But after today, you've made them reconsider. Marcus didn't react, just listened. You're changing the conversation, she said quietly, and you haven't even been hired yet. He looked out the glass toward the city lights. Then maybe it's time they decide if they want to be part of that conversation or left behind by it. End 4. She said nothing more, and neither did he. But something had already shifted again, something deeper than opportunity, something like inevitability. 2 days later, Marcus stood before the wide glass doors of Hamilton Global's executive conference suite, heart steady, mind razor sharp. The email had arrived just past midnight, a vague invitation to an informal strategy session, with no agenda and no listed attendees, only a note signed by Rose. Be prepared to listen more than speak. He knew that tone. She was warning him, or testing him, or both. He adjusted his tie, smoothed his blazer, and stepped inside. The room was a far cry from the sterile training floors he had grown used to. The mahogany table stretched like a runway, flanked by deep leather chairs. The air smelled faintly of bergamot and money. At the far end of the room sat 5 men, white, late 52nd to early 72nd, each wearing the same kind of expensive calm that came from decades of unchallenged authority. None rose to greet him. Rose stood near the window, arms folded, eyes watchful but neutral. One of the men, gray hair brushed back like a corporate statue, gestured to an empty seat at the far end. Mr. Young, thank you for coming. Marcus sat, posture upright. Of course. The man smiled thinly. Let's not waste time. You've made quite an impression, both in the leadership cohort and, notably, in the media response simulation. We've received multiple internal reports praising your insight and unconventional clarity. Is that a compliment or a concern? Marcus asked calmly. Another man leaned forward. A compliment, but one that comes with questions. You see, Innovation is valuable. Disruption, however, must be managed. There's a fine line between leading change and causing instability. Instability, Marcus echoed, often looks like truth when it's inconvenient. Oh, silence stretched, then snapped, as the man across from him cleared his throat. Let's speak plainly. You're being considered for a fast-track position in global strategy. It's rare for someone from outside our system to be positioned that quickly. Marcus held his gaze. You mean someone who didn't come through Ivy League pipelines? Someone who didn't intern under a board member's cousin? Someone who doesn't look like he belongs at this table? The words were neither angry nor accusatory. They were clean, surgical, and every man at the table shifted, just a fraction. The oldest among them, the one who hadn't spoken yet, finally did. Mr. Young, this company has been built on certain rhythms, networks, understandings. We're not blind to the optics. Diversity is not just valuable, it's essential now. But what we need is someone who can integrate, not divide. Marcus leaned slightly forward. And who gets to define what's divisive? Me speaking uncomfortable truths, or the comfort of a system that's built on selective silence? Across the room, Rose remained silent, but her eyes never left his. Let me ask you something, Marcus continued. Why me? You already have your candidates qualified, compliant, predictable. So what's this really about? The first man hesitated, then spoke. You're not just intelligent, Mr. Young. You're resonating. Internally, externally. Words gotten out. Investors liked your language at the rooftop session. Employees are asking about you. You've become visible. That's not something we expected, but it's something we may need. So this is damage control, Marcus said, tone flat. It's opportunity, the man corrected. For all of us. With your help, we could shift our image without losing our core. Marcus smiled slowly. Your image isn't the problem. Your core is. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't discomfort. It was awareness. The oldest man leaned back. Mr. Young, we're not naive. We understand the realities of the world, but we need to know you can be tempered, that your ambition won't outpace the company's stability. Marcus stood then, slowly, deliberately. I'm not here to be tempered. I'm here because I've spent decades watching decisions made in rooms like this destroy people like me, and I refuse to be grateful for a seat at the table if I have to leave my spine at the door. One, he looked at each of them, unblinking. You don't need a mascot. You don't need a mouthpiece. You need someone who will tell you when your strategy is killing your future and still have the skill to fix it. That's me. You want safe? I'm not. You want real change? Then stop asking if I can fit in and start asking if you're ready to evolve. He turned to leave. You walk out, one of the men said sharply, and the offer is gone. Marcus paused at the door. Then maybe it was never real. As he stepped into the hallway, Rose followed. They didn't speak until they reached the elevator. She pressed the down button, then turned to him. You knew exactly what you were walking into. I've walked into worse, he said. They're not used to being told no. Then it's about time someone did. She nodded. You rattled them again. They're going to hate me. Maybe, she said, but some of them already respect you, and the rest will remember you. The elevator doors opened. As he stepped in, she added, Don't disappear. This isn't over. Marcus turned, holding her gaze. It never is. The doors closed. Below, the city moved on. But something had shifted. A boundary had been crossed. And whether they liked it or not, Marcus Young was no longer knocking at the door. He was inside. Marcus didn't go home that night, not because he had nowhere to go, but because the weight of that boardroom had followed him, clinging to his collar like the scent of a fire that refused to burn out. Instead, he found himself sitting on a rusted bench in Jackson Park, coat wrapped tight against the wind off Lake Michigan. The hum of the city buzzed behind him, sirens, laughter, the distant rumble of the L, but in his chest there was only silence. A kind of stillness that comes when you've spoken your truth and now wait to see who it offends, who it awakens, and who pretends not to hear. He didn't regret it, not a word, but he knew the price. He leaned back, watching clouds drift across the dark sky, thinking about the last time he had felt this still. It had been years ago, the night after he resigned from his post at the UN, when the institution he had trusted proved that justice had a hierarchy and his voice, fluent in 9 languages, was somehow too loud in every one of them. Back then, He had stood before another room full of powerful men and been asked to adjust his tone, to respect the sensitivities of legacy partners. He had walked away that day too, but not without cost. That resignation had meant starting over. It had meant cleaning floors to feed his daughter, tutoring high schoolers under a false name to make rent, and swallowing his pride more times than he cared to remember. But it had also taught him something. True dignity wasn't quiet. It was defiant. It didn't beg. It declared. His phone buzzed in his coat pocket. Unknown number. He let it ring twice, then answered. "Mr. Young?" The voice was male, clipped, British accent. "This is Adrian Clark, head of corporate strategy at Hamilton Global's European division. I'm calling regarding the conversation you had this morning." Marcus stood slowly. "You're a few time zones late, Mr. Clark." "I stay late when the winds shift," Clark said. "And they've shifted, thanks to you. Word traveled fast. You've created quite the storm. I wasn't trying to. That's the problem. Storms never try. They simply arrive." Marcus waited. "We've been watching the U.S. branch for some time. Too insulated, too fragile. Your presence, it's catalyzed overdue conversations. I wanted to reach out before someone else did. If things stall on your side, we'd be very interested in your vision over here." "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a seat. The job would follow." Marcus didn't answer immediately. He watched a squirrel dart across the path, oblivious to power or politics. "I appreciate the call, but I'm not done here yet." "Ugh." Clark gave a soft chuckle. "Of course not. But the offer stands. Sometimes change needs different soil to grow." The line went dead. Marcus slipped the phone back into his coat and sat again, heart steadier now. Options. He hadn't had those in a long time. But with options came responsibility and the clarity to know why you were choosing one path over another. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Hamilton Global earlier than usual. The receptionist gave him a tight-lipped nod, clearly unsure whether he was rising star or walking controversy. As he reached his desk in the cohort office, he found an envelope waiting. Heavy cardstock, no logo, just his name. Inside was a single sheet. "Mr. Young, you've been selected for the final evaluation round. You will shadow an executive for the next 48 hours. Observe, advise, influence. If you survive that, the next step isn't an interview. It's a decision. No name, no signature. Just a time, 9 a.m. Location, 47th floor, executive suite." He exhaled, eyes narrowing. Rose again. It had to be. At precisely 9, he stepped off the elevator into a floor that most employees never saw. No cubicles here, just glass, steel, art worth more than his childhood home, and a silence that demanded obedience. Rose's assistant, a young man with perfect hair and a permanent look of mild fear, motioned toward the corner office. Marcus entered without knocking. Rose stood by the window, coffee in hand, looking down at the city like a queen surveying her chessboard. "You're early," she said. "I didn't sleep." She turned. "Then you're ready. What exactly am I shadowing?" "Me," she replied, taking a sip. "Every move, every call, every lie, I don't tell, but let others believe." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You're letting me inside your head?" "I'm letting you see how the machine works, not the training version, the real thing, the one that eats good intentions for breakfast." He said nothing, just nodded. The next 48 hours were a blur of meetings, negotiations, strategic sessions, and thinly veiled wars dressed in cordial smiles. Rose was a force sharp, ruthless when necessary, but always a few steps ahead. She listened more than she spoke, asked questions that cornered people without them realizing it, and used silence like a scalpel. But what stunned Marcus wasn't her power, it was the precision of her restraint. She knew when to let someone hang themselves with their own words. She knew when to appear indifferent and when to strike. In one particularly tense moment, a senior VP attempted to shift blame for a failed rollout onto a junior staffer. Rose didn't blink. She simply said, "Remind me, who signed off on the final projections?" The man stuttered. She looked to Marcus. "Did you catch that?" "Yes," he said calmly. He tried to weaponize hierarchy to bury accountability. "And?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Good. That's lesson 1. Power without precision is just noise." That night, after a 12-hour stretch, they sat in her office, lights low. "You still want this?" she asked him. Marcus leaned forward. "I want it more than ever." She studied him. "Even knowing how much you'll have to bend?" "I don't bend," he adapt, "but I won't break." There was a long pause, then she nodded. "Then be ready. Tomorrow, we stop testing." "Oh, what happens tomorrow?" She looked out the window again, voice low. "Tomorrow, we see who fears your presence and who starts following your lead." And for the first time since he stepped into this world, Marcus realized the test wasn't about proving he belonged. It was about whether he could change the room before it changed him. By sunrise the next day, Marcus could already feel it, the shift. Not loud, not obvious, but unmistakable. Like when the air changes before a storm. The elevator ride to the 35th floor felt longer than usual. His reflection in the mirrored walls looked the same, but his gut knew better. Something was coming. When the doors slid open, the usual nods and polite greetings from staff were replaced by curt acknowledgments or avoided glances. Even the receptionist, normally chipper, merely said, "Morning," without looking up from her screen. He walked to his desk. It was clean, too clean. His folders, printouts, even his mug were gone. A simple note sat in their place. CHR. No name, no explanation. Marcus didn't panic. He moved through the hallways like a man with nothing to prove, eyes forward, heart steady. But beneath the calm surface, the old instincts stirred. He'd seen this before in Ghana, in Geneva, in smaller rooms with equally dangerous consequences. The whisper campaign had begun. It always started the same way: shift the air, cast doubt, then let silence do the rest. He reached HR on the 21st floor. The door opened to a sterile white office, where a woman in a pale gray suit waited with a clipboard. She smiled the way people do when they've been told to smile but don't want to. "Mr. Young, thank you for coming. Just a brief update to confirm that your onboarding process is on hold pending internal review." "Review of what?" he asked, voice steady. "We've received concerns," she said. "Allegations regarding improper conduct, aggressive behavior in strategy sessions, a pattern of undermining leadership. Specifics? I'm afraid I'm not authorized to discuss details at this point." He let out a short breath through his nose. "Who filed these concerns?" "Anonymous for now, but this is standard protocol." Marcus leaned slightly forward. "I've been in this company for 2 weeks. I haven't even been hired, and you're telling me I'm being investigated for being too direct?" "No one said that," she said, eyes darting. "Then say what you mean." The woman froze. "I'm just doing my job, Mr. Young." He rose. "And I'm just doing mine. You can file that under unapologetic." He left without waiting for dismissal. Downstairs, the whispers continued. Gregory, one of the remaining candidates, suddenly avoided eye contact. Elena offered him a tight smile in the hallway but walked faster past him than usual. Josh, once eager and deferential, now looked at Marcus like a threat instead of a peer. The message was clear: step out of line, and the machine turns on you. Marcus entered the break room and found Rose by the coffee machine, pouring herself a black roast. She didn't turn around when he stepped in. "You've felt it," she said. "Arjus called me upstairs. Allegations." "I know." She finally faced him. "They're afraid of you. Then why give them fuel? Because if you survive this, they can't ignore you anymore." He studied her. "You're letting me hang." "No," she said. "I'm letting them try. There's a difference. You could clear this up with one call, and then they'll say you're protected, that I've picked a favorite, that this is about politics, not merit. Isn't it?" "Everything is," she said. "But you knew that walking in." Marcus exhaled slowly. "So what now?" She sipped her coffee. "Now, you fight smart. You don't defend yourself. You outwork them. You don't beg. You deliver, loudly, publicly, without apology. Because the only thing this place respects more than power is resilience." He nodded once and turned to leave. Her voice stopped him. "Marcus? Yeah? If you need to scream," she said, "do it behind closed doors. But out here, you speak like a man who already owns the room." Izzy. That afternoon, Marcus requested the hardest, most visible assignment available, an investor strategy pitch set for Friday, 2 days away, with only 48 hours to prepare. It wasn't supposed to be his. It was meant for Gregory. But Marcus asked for it publicly, in front of the entire cohort. "Unless," he added, You think I'm not qualified?" The room went silent. Gregory bristled but said nothing. The coordinator hesitated, eyes flicking to a supervisor nearby. Then he said, "It's yours." Him. The next 2 days were a blur. Marcus worked around the clock. He reviewed financial reports from the last 8 quarters, dissected case studies from other global firms, built a pitch that fused ethics with profitability, something Wall Street rarely heard but desperately needed. He even recorded voiceovers in French, Swahili, and Mandarin for key markets, underscoring his global understanding. No one could say he wasn't prepared. On Friday morning, he stood before the glass conference wall, looking into the sea of dark suits and silver pens. The investors had flown in. The board was present. Rose sat near the front, arms folded. Gregory was 3 rows back, lips tight. Elena and Josh flanked him, silent. Marcus took the stage. He began not with a spreadsheet, but with a story. "My mother used to tell me, if you want to be heard in a room full of noise, don't shout louder, say something they can't ignore. Today, I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to tell you the truth about where this company is heading and how we can lead not just with strength, but with conscience." For 45 minutes, he laid it out. A plan that was bold but grounded, profitable but principled. He showed projections, tied them to global responsibility, connected social perception to market share. He never once mentioned the investigation, the whispers, the doubt. He didn't have to. Every sentence he spoke cut through the fog. When he finished, the room was still. Then came a slow clap, one person, then another, then the whole room. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Rose approached. "They'll pretend it was always your seat," she said. "They'll rewrite the story so they were never against you." "Let them," Marcus replied. "I'm not here for their version. I'm here to write my own." And for the first time since walking into Hamilton Global, Marcus didn't feel like an outsider fighting for a place. He felt like the center of gravity had shifted. And this time, it was pulling the whole room toward him. The Monday after the pitch felt like walking into a different world. Marcus stepped into Hamilton Global's towering lobby, and for the first time, eyes didn't just follow him, they acknowledged him. Security nodded before he flashed his badge. A marketing associate he barely knew greeted him by name. In the elevator, 2 interns whispered, but didn't look away when he caught their glance. He had crossed a line, not just professionally but symbolically. But the higher you climb, the colder the air, and Marcus knew that recognition came wrapped in new dangers. As he stepped off on the 35th floor, Elena was waiting. "You're wanted upstairs," she said, her tone clipped but not unkind. "Boardroom, 10 minutes ago." "Oh." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "They're early." "They're unsettled," she replied, then lowered her voice. "And Gregory's been in and out of closed meetings all morning." Marcus nodded, his jaw tightening. He made his way toward the executive floor, the walls lined with photos of past CEOs, white men in grayscale, frozen smiles of legacy and unspoken rules. He passed them like ghosts. When he entered the boardroom, he was greeted not with applause or warmth, but with silence. Rose sat at the head of the table, flanked by 4 board members. A 5th chair remained conspicuously empty. "Take a seat, Marcus," Rose said. Her voice was neutral, but her eyes were alert. He sat. One of the men, a heavy-set figure with gold cufflinks and a voice like gravel, leaned forward. "We've reviewed your proposal. It's ambitious and provocative." Marcus said nothing. Another board member, a silver-haired woman with hawk-like features, chimed in. "Too provocative, some would say. You referenced ethical investments in regions where we have delicate relationships, governments that aren't exactly thrilled about being called out." Marcus leaned slightly forward. "You mean countries where we've been turning a blind eye to human rights violations because it protects our margins?" "Don't be dramatic," the first man snapped. "This is business. This is reputation," Marcus countered. "And reputation is profit, especially now. You know that as well as I do." And Rose remained silent, watching both sides. The 3rd board member finally spoke softer, older, more calculating. "We're not saying your ideas don't have merit, but change requires a choreography. We don't leap, we transition." Marcus met his gaze. "Transitions don't work when the floor's already on fire." The woman tapped a file in front of her. "We've also reviewed your personnel file again. A few inconsistencies remain." "Such as?" Marcus asked. Your departure from the UN. Your prior employment in language analysis with private contractors. There's very little documentation. You've moved across agencies with unusually quiet exits. I was in conflict zones, Marcus replied. Some things don't come with press releases. And now you want to reshape a global corporation, she said coolly. That's a very public stage. Rose finally spoke. That's exactly why he's here. He understands the world in ways we've ignored. That's why his message resonated not just with investors but with employees. The woman shifted her eyes toward Rose. You've taken a personal stake in his success. I've taken a professional stake in necessary evolution. Marcus could feel it now. This wasn't just about his pitch. It was about positioning, politics, preservation of a power structure cracking under the weight of a new voice. His voice. I'm not here to play a part, he said, his tone even but charged. I didn't climb up just to blend in. I came because this company is at a crossroads. You can dress it up however you like, but the public doesn't trust institutions like this anymore. You want to survive the next decade? You need authenticity. And that doesn't come from old scripts. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was tense, sharp like wire. Finally, Rose stood. That will be all for now. Marcus, stay behind. The others filed out slowly. A few gave him glances that were neither approving nor damning, just measuring. He could feel the scales tipping, but not yet in his favor. When the door closed, Rose exhaled and walked to the window. They're circling, she said. I know. They think you're dangerous. I am, Marcus said, but only to the version of themselves they're afraid to outgrow. She turned to him, studying his face. They'll dig, they'll find ways to push back, and when they can't discredit your ideas, they'll try to discredit your past. Let them. She shook her head. They're not after truth, Marcus. They're after control. And the closer you get to real influence, the more creative they'll become. He stepped closer. So what's your move? I've scheduled a press briefing for next week, she said. You'll speak, publicly, about the future of the company, your strategy, your vision. That pitch? It wasn't a one-time stunt. We're going to build it out. Internal initiatives, external partnerships, media visibility. If they want to corner you, we shine more light. Marcus blinked. You're giving me a platform. No, she corrected. I'm giving you responsibility. There's a difference. He nodded slowly. I won't play safe. I'm counting on that, she said. But you'll need allies, quiet ones. People who understand the machine but believe it needs rewiring. He looked out the window at the skyline. Do they exist? They do, she said. You just haven't met them yet. That night, as Marcus walked home under the orange streetlights of the South Side, he passed a mural he hadn't noticed before, paint peeling, colors fading, but the words still legible. Speak even if your voice trembles. He stopped, hands in his coat pockets, staring up at the wall. The city around him pulsed with noise sirens, bus brakes, someone arguing into a phone, but he felt a stillness again, not the silence of isolation, the calm before momentum. They had tried to make him a warning, but maybe, just maybe, he was becoming a symbol. 3 days later, Marcus found himself standing in front of the mirror inside the men's restroom on the executive floor. He was adjusting his tie, not out of vanity, but necessity. Every detail mattered now. The briefing was in an hour. Rose had told him to be precise, deliberate, calm, but no amount of preparation could erase what clawed at him from inside. Because this wasn't just about the company anymore. This was about reckoning with the past, the silence he had kept too long, and the story they might soon drag into the light whether he was ready or not. The mirror reflected more than his tailored suit. It reflected the boy who once sat in a language immersion classroom in Atlanta, translating between his teacher and a Cameroonian classmate, the young man whose tongue moved seamlessly between cultures while people still looked at his skin and asked if he belonged, and the soldier who later used those same languages for shadow operations, names he couldn't speak, flags he couldn't pledge to, consequences he couldn't forget, secrets that had followed him like shadows. A sharp knock on the restroom door pulled him back. It was Elena. "They're ready," she said simply. Marcus walked down the hall with her. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "Nerves are expected." "I'm not nervous," he replied. "I'm aware." As they entered the press room, the lights hit him like a wave. Cameras were positioned along the back. A dozen reporters, a few analysts, and key members of the board sat with tablets and pens. Rose stood off to the side, dressed in navy, nodding at him subtly. The podium awaited. He stepped up and began. "My name is Marcus Young. I am not a traditional executive. I am not from a legacy family. I didn't walk the Ivy League halls or inherit a board seat. I come from a neighborhood where opportunity felt more like rumor than reality. But I also come from discipline, from language, from war zones and negotiations, from listening before speaking, and now from a belief that companies like this must evolve or be erased." There were no teleprompters, just conviction. He walked them through the core of his vision: investment reallocation, ethical branding, human rights transparency, and internal diversity audits. He framed it not as political, but inevitable. "Consumers today don't just want products," he said. "They want values, they want proof, and if we don't adapt, we won't be disrupted, we'll be discarded." Some reporters scribbled, others watched with narrowed eyes. And then came the question he expected. A woman from the Tribune stood. "Mr. Young, there are rumors about your departure from the UN, about private contracts, even field operations in regions with classified conflicts. Some are suggesting these roles conflict with your message of transparency. How do you respond?" Marcus didn't flinch. "I've worked in silence before," he said. "Places where lives depended on what wasn't said out loud. I made choices I live with every day, but I have never profited from oppression. I have never used my skills to protect greed. My history doesn't disqualify me, it qualifies me, because I know the cost of unchecked power." A murmur passed through the room. Another reporter stood. "There's also chatter about an internal HR probe, claims of aggression, manipulation. Anything you want to say about that?" "Yes," Marcus said. "It was investigated. It was dismissed. But let me say this. I won't apologize for being assertive when the room only hears me if I shout. I won't shrink to make others comfortable, and I won't pretend to be anyone other than who I am." He left the podium in silence, without waiting for polite applause. Rose met him backstage. "That was suicide," she said quietly. "Or brilliance. I can't tell yet." "I didn't come to survive, Rose," he replied. "I came to change something. That doesn't happen quietly." Back on the 35th floor, he returned to his office to find a brown envelope on his chair. No name, no label. He opened it carefully. Inside was a photo, blurry, black and white, old. It showed him in fatigues, standing outside a tent with two men who were now dead. Attached was a note. "You should choose your words more carefully. Some of us remember." Marcus's hands didn't shake, but his breath caught. Not because he was afraid, because he knew exactly who had sent it. Gregory. The timing, the precision, the warning wrapped in nostalgia. He burned the photo in the sink of the staff kitchenette, watching the edges curl and blacken. Fire purified, and he had no time to entertain ghosts from men who played coward from behind paper threats. That night, he returned home to find his neighbor, Mr. Darnell, sitting on the stoop. "Saw you on television," the old man said. "Looked like you were holding your own." "Trying," Marcus replied. Mr. Darnell leaned back. "You ever heard the story of the bell ringer from Selma? Kid used to ring the church bell every Sunday. During the marches they told him to stop, said it was a distraction, said it stirred trouble, but he rang it anyway. Not for the people who were already marching, but for the ones too afraid to come out." Marcus looked at him, silent. "You're ringing bells, son," Darnell said. "Don't be surprised when some folks come running with hammers." Marcus smiled faintly. "Let them come. I've got more than bells. I've got truth, and it doesn't rattle easy." He sat there for a while, watching the sky darken, the city hum alive. Somewhere inside, something settled. Not peace, not safety, but clarity. They wanted him to be silent, but silence was a language he no longer chose to speak. The next morning began with a silence that felt rehearsed. As Marcus stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor, the usual greetings were replaced by nods too tight, smiles too brief. He moved through the space like a ghost walking among masks. Something had shifted, again. And this time, it was less visible but more dangerous. Elena met him at his office door. "You need to see this," she said, her voice low. She handed him a tablet. On the screen was a leaked report, confidential, internal, dated 2 years ago. Subject line: Field Operative Concerns Young, M. It listed incidents, unverified but loaded with insinuation. civilian tension, psychological evaluations, an aggressive behavioral profile. The kind of report that gets whispered in HR corridors, the kind of document you never expect to see sunlight. He scrolled, jaw clenched. "This is fake," he said. "Parts of it are built on real names, real missions, but the conclusions? Fabricated. None of these had follow-through. I was cleared, every time." Elena nodded. "But someone wants it out, wants people to question you. Even if none of it sticks, it leaves residue. End. Where did it leak? An anonymous tip to a financial blog with a history of corporate exposés. But it's already being picked up by others. You're trending." He turned away, thinking, calculating. The move was classic. Create doubt, force reaction, cloud the momentum. "Elena," he said, voice steady. "Get me Rose." 10 minutes later, he was in Rose's private office. She had already seen the leak. Her monitor displayed the blog post, headline blazing, "Hamilton's Rising Star or Dangerous Maverick." She clicked the window closed as Marcus entered. "Gregory?" he asked. "Most likely," she said. "But he's not stupid enough to leave a trail. This is surgical, cold, which means it's not just him. He has help." Marcus sat. "So what now? You cut me loose to save the brand?" Rose gave him a sharp look. "Don't insult me. It's a fair question. Number it's not. You've become the embodiment of every conversation this company has avoided for decades. If I cut you now, it confirms everything you warned them about, that we tolerate the image of progress, not the substance." He looked at her, eyes narrowing. "But you're also under pressure." "Yes," she said. "And the board is divided. Some want to hold, some want to strike. Gregory wants to burn it all down if it means you're out. So we need to move, not just react." "Oh." She stood and walked to the window, her back to him. "We give them transparency before they demand it. A profile piece, New York Times, in-depth, long form, your words, your past, your truth, no filters. We frame it, not them." Marcus blinked. "You want me to lay myself bare? I want you to seize control of your own narrative. Because if you don't, they'll do it for you. And they'll tell a story you don't even recognize." He nodded slowly, the weight of it settling on his shoulders. "Get me the reporter, someone fair, someone who listens." As he returned to his office, Elena was waiting again. "Also, someone from your past called. He didn't leave a name, but said to remind you of Mokolo checkpoint." Marcus froze. That name hadn't been spoken in over a decade. Not since the Cameroon border mission that had gone sideways, civilian hostages, a broken chain of command, and a choice he had made that saved lives but cost him a citation, and the silence. He had never told anyone what really happened. Only one other man knew, Caleb Rivera, and if Caleb was calling now, it meant trouble was closer than expected. "Elena," Marcus said, "cancel my 3 p.m. and get me a burner phone." She didn't ask questions, she just moved. That night, he sat in his apartment, lights dimmed, holding the old flip phone Elena had delivered in a blank envelope. He dialed the number Caleb had used. It rang twice. "Marcus," the voice answered. Same rasp, same cadence. "Been a long time," Caleb said. "I saw your face on the screen. You're making noise." "I didn't know you were still following me," Marcus replied. "I wasn't, but others are. The leak? That's just the front. There's a deeper file, one you thought was sealed. They're going to use it." "I don't care if they do." "You should," Caleb said. "Because it includes things you don't even know were written down. Conversations you didn't realize were logged. If this goes public, it won't just hurt you. It'll hurt the people you protected." Marcus exhaled slowly. "So what do you want me to do? Hide? Bow out?" "No," Caleb said. "I want you to remember who you were back then. The man who didn't wait for permission. You told me once that silence was complicity. Well, now's your time to shout." The line went dead. Marcus sat there, the phone heavy in his palm. He looked out the window at the city, at the glowing skyline that both welcomed and threatened. He'd always known this wouldn't be easy, but he hadn't expected the past to chase him this far into the future. The next morning, the New York Times piece began its first draft. The reporter, a woman named Dana Keller, arrived at his office with a small recorder and an open notebook. She was in her late 40s, sharp but warm. "Let's not start with the company," she said. "Let's start with you." And so Marcus began. He spoke of his mother who taught ESL on weekends, of his father who disappeared before he could remember, of the languages that kept him afloat when school systems failed him, of the first time he was frisked at age 14 for walking home in a hoodie, of the way people smiled at his fluency but flinched at his skin, of the war zones and the weight of command, of guilt and choice and survival. Dana listened, didn't interrupt, and when he finished, she said, "They're not ready for this story." Marcus replied, "They never are, but that's not the point. The point is to tell it anyway." Later that night, Rose sent him one line in a message. History doesn't change by accident. It changes when someone refuses to stay quiet. And Marcus, for the first time in years, felt a quiet kind of peace. Not because he was safe, but because he finally understood that the storm he had walked into wasn't just meant to break him. It was meant to prove that he could carry lightning. The article dropped on a rainy Thursday morning, splashed across the digital front page of the New York Times with the headline, "From War Zones to Boardrooms, The Journey of Marcus Young." Within hours, it was everywhere on the mouths of morning anchors, dissected in podcasts, quoted on social media, and printed on bulletin boards in corporate lounges across America. It wasn't just a profile, it was a reckoning. Dana Keller's writing didn't sanitize his past, nor did it glamorize it. It told the story as it was, brutal, tender, complex, and defiant. It included the languages, the battlefield decisions, the near misses with politics, the choices made without applause. It told of the orphan child who became an interpreter before puberty, the soldier who used words instead of bullets when possible, and the executive who now stood accused not of failure but of audacity. Rose's office was buzzing. She had cleared her morning to deal with the fallout, but instead, what came pouring in was something far more unpredictable. Support. Emails from heads of nonprofits. Invitations to speak at policy forums. Personal letters from veterans and teachers and activists who had never even heard of Hamilton Global until that morning. Some of the board members, however, were less enthusiastic. 3 requested an emergency meeting. One called it a dangerous glorification of disobedience. Another claimed the article placed too much emphasis on trauma instead of skill. But Rose, sitting calmly in her chair, simply replied to them all with one line, "Skill without conscience is how empires collapse." Then she picked up her phone and called Marcus. "They're stirred," she said. "No greeting." "They should be," Marcus replied. "I didn't write it to reassure them." "No," she agreed. "You wrote it to break the ceiling they built." There was a pause. "Now it's time for the next move." All. That afternoon, Marcus was scheduled to present the revised ethics and operations overhaul plan to the board. It wasn't just policy, it was the fulcrum on which his future at Hamilton balanced. As he walked into the boardroom, his posture was firm, gaze level, and mind sharpened by truth, not fear. Gregory was already seated, tie flawless, face impassive, a statue carved from ambition and disdain. Next to him sat Margaret Way, who had once supported Marcus quietly but had grown noticeably silent in recent weeks. Then there was Jonah Riles, an old-school capitalist who never made eye contact unless he had to, and at the far end, Rose calm as ever, fingers steepled, waiting. Marcus began without preamble. "You've all read the profile. You know where I come from. Today I'm not asking you to approve a strategy because it's convenient or in vogue. I'm asking because without it, this company remains a house built on outdated bricks, strong in appearance but hollow in resilience." He clicked a remote, and the screen behind him filled with figures. Declining public trust, consumer skepticism, internal attrition patterns. Then came the rebuild his plan. Staff development rooted in equity, contracts with transparent partners only, third-party audits published publicly, a cultural reset that forced the company to look not just at margins but mirrors. "You can reject this," Marcus said, voice low but unwavering. "You can vote no, but understand this. The world is no longer waiting for permission from legacy power, and neither am I." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was heavy. Finally, Gregory spoke. "So we're expected to reinvent the company based on feelings, personal narratives?" Marcus didn't flinch. "Number, you're expected to evolve based on data, survival, and ethics. But if it takes a personal story to remind you of what's at stake, so be it." Gregory leaned back, eyes narrowed. And what if we decide your presence is the real liability? Marcus leaned in slightly. Then I walk. But I don't walk away. I walk forward, and with me, so does the truth you tried to bury. Rose cleared her throat. We'll vote now. But before we do, let me remind you, leadership isn't determined by comfort. It's defined by courage. The vote passed, barely, 5-4. Gregory abstained, masking fury with indifference. Later, as Marcus left the boardroom, Elena approached with an odd look. We've had a request, she said, from the Justice Reform Institute. They want you to keynote next month's forum. Why? Marcus asked. Because apparently you've become more than an executive, she said. You've become a symbol. He didn't respond immediately. Symbols were dangerous things. They inspired, yes, but they also attracted fire. Still, he nodded. Set the date. That night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, nursing a glass of water and reviewing the speech draft. On the windowsill beside him sat a small, framed photo of his mother. She'd passed 2 years prior quietly, with a dignity forged through years of public school exhaustion and community advocacy. She never got to see him wear a suit like the ones he now wore daily, but she'd always told him, if you walk into a room and they expect you to be quiet, speak louder but softer. It scares them more. As he thought of her, the doorbell rang. It was unexpected. He checked the peephole. No one. Just a manila envelope on the mat. He picked it up, opened it cautiously. Inside was another photo, a different angle this time. Him, during a mission, surrounded by people who didn't survive, and a single sentence typed below, there's more where this came from. N. He closed the envelope and sat down, heart calm despite the warning. The war hadn't ended. It had simply changed form. But so had he. Marcus sat still for several long seconds, the manila envelope resting on the table beside his untouched glass of water. The photograph inside wasn't just a threat, it was precision. The angle, the context, the phrasing of the message, it all screamed insider knowledge. Someone had access, someone close. He reached for his phone, dialing only one number. Rose picked up after the first ring. You got something, didn't you? She said without preamble. A photo, Marcus replied. From the Mokolo mission. Someone wants me rattled. It was left at my door. Her pause was brief but loaded. So it begins, she murmured. We'll sweep your building, quietly. And Marcus, this means they're scared, desperate. Desperation breeds mistakes. And casualties, he added. I'll handle it. Not alone, Rose warned. You're not a soldier anymore. You're a symbol now, remember? Symbols don't get to be reckless. But recklessness had nothing to do with what came next. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen counter with his laptop open, pulling up encrypted archives he hadn't touched in years. Buried deep within them were notes, logs, field debriefs from his last overseas rotation, specifically the Mokolo checkpoint debacle, the civilians who had died, the command that pulled support, the silence that followed. Caleb had hinted the files had been manipulated, that new documentation had been forged. Marcus needed to find the original timeline before someone else weaponized the revision. By dawn, he had pieced together the probable leak chain. 3 names stood out: 2 military liaisons, 1 foreign attaché who now worked quietly for a private intelligence firm in Virginia, and 1 internal risk at Hamilton. Director of Legal Affairs, Halvin Dunn, a man with the face of a diplomat and the ethics of a loaded gun. Marcus had only crossed paths with him once, a brief meeting, cold handshake, dismissive glance. But now, Halvin's signature appeared in a time-stamped file request 2 weeks ago. Young Military Personnel Clearance Review. That was no coincidence. Later that morning, Marcus confronted Elena in the hallway outside the strategy room. Do we have an internal monitoring system on private file access within our cloud? She nodded. Tiered access. But legal and execs bypass most alerts unless someone flags it. Flag this, he said, handing her a flash drive. Trace every document with Halvin's login from the past month, and be discreet. She looked at the drive, then back at him. This going to burn? Only if we let it fester, he replied. That afternoon, Marcus and Rose met privately in her glass-walled office, blinds drawn. She had already spoken with 2 trusted board members. The leak had not been sanctioned. In fact, one of them, an older man named Desmond Hale, was livid. This is a character assassination, Desmond had told her. And if we don't get ahead of it, We're complicit. So what's the move? Marcus asked. Rose handed him a binder. Transparency, again. This time, internal. A full departmental audit. You're spearheading it. That'll rattle them. Good. Rattling's overdue. But here's the key. You do it by the book. No personal vendettas. No traps. You uncover what's wrong and present it clean. Let them choke on the truth, not your anger. He nodded. Understood. 2 days later, Marcus stood in front of a room full of senior staff, department heads, and a few jittery executives. Starting today, every contract, every internal audit, and every policy loop within the last 5 years will be reviewed for compliance, ethics, and accountability. We are not doing this to assign blame. We are doing this because accountability isn't a punishment. It's a foundation. The room buzzed with unease. Questions were asked. Marcus answered each calmly, directly. There was no bravado, only precision. People responded, but not all. That evening, Halvin Dunn requested a one-on-one meeting. Rose allowed it, but insisted it take place in the presence of legal counsel. Halvin agreed, but when he entered the room, he wore the smile of a man who had already drawn his battle lines. "Mr. Young," he said, extending a hand. "You're quite the reformist." Marcus didn't take the hand. "I'm an employee doing his job, something you seem to misunderstand." Halvin sat, folding one leg over the other, glancing at the company attorney. "Let's not pretend this is about reform. You've made yourself a threat, and threats have consequences. Is that a warning?" "It's a reality," Halvin replied smoothly. "Your file is colorful, and now it's public. If I were you, I'd consider stepping down before someone decides to color it darker." Marcus leaned forward. "You know what the difference is between a secret and a story, Halvin? A secret can be buried. A story once told belongs to everyone, and mine's out, which means your leverage just turned to dust." Halvin's jaw tensed. The lawyer interjected, advising they conclude the meeting. As Halvin left, Rose watched him through the glass. "He'll push harder now," she said. "Let him," Marcus replied, "because this time he's coming into the light." The following week, the internal audit uncovered discrepancies subtle, buried within multi-tiered vendor contracts and quiet settlements. Nothing explosive, but enough to raise flags. Enough to show a pattern. Enough to tie Halvin to a series of decisions that lined pockets while silencing staff. Rose took the findings to the board in a closed session. Marcus was not present, by choice. He didn't want them to think this was a crusade. This was about structure, not vengeance. After 3 hours, Rose emerged from the meeting, shoulders straighter than when she entered. "Halvin's done," she said simply. "He offered to resign. Did you accept?" "No," she said. "I fired him." That night, Marcus walked through a quiet park near his neighborhood. The air was crisp. The city lights shimmered on puddles beneath old street lamps. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't gloating. He was just breathing. For the first time in weeks, he felt the weight shift off his back, not vanish, but redistribute. His phone buzzed. It was Caleb again. The message read, "Saw the news. Thought you should know more's coming. Different players, bigger stakes. But you've started something, Marcus. They'll either join you or try to erase you." Marcus looked up at the sky, then down the empty path ahead. Let them try. Marcus stood at the rooftop of the Hamilton Global headquarters, a thermos of black coffee warming his hands as dawn crept across the Manhattan skyline. The air was still sharp with winter's edge, but inside his chest, something had begun to thaw. The storm brought by Halvin's shadow campaign had passed, at least for now, but Marcus knew too well that quiet didn't mean safety. It meant regrouping, and he wasn't the only one aware of that. A text from Caleb had come in overnight, short and to the point. "New movement. DOJ might be sniffing around. Not for you, for Hamilton." Marcus reread it twice. The Department of Justice didn't sniff lightly. If they were circling, someone higher up was in their sights, which meant the next wave wouldn't come from the company's walls but from the government's reach. And if Hamilton got caught in that current, every piece of rot would be dragged to the surface. Back downstairs, Rose was already in her office, a steaming mug in front of her, reading internal reports. She looked up when Marcus entered, nodded once. "Did you see Caleb's message?" "Yeah," he replied. "You think it's real?" She pushed a folder toward him. "I got a call at 6 a.m. from a source in Washington. Quiet inquiry, not official, but if what they suspect is true, Then Halvin was just the tip. Marcus opened the folder. Shell companies, unusual PAC donations, foreign consulting groups with connections to certain board members. Some of it was circumstantial, but some of it looked like threads waiting to unravel. "You knew this might be bigger," he said. Rose gave a tired smile. "I hoped it wasn't, but we don't have the luxury of hoping anymore." By noon, Marcus was in a different kind of meeting. This one wasn't in a conference room with polished wood and bottled water. It was in a rented apartment in the Bronx, hosted by a grassroots coalition focused on corporate ethics and racial equity. The invite had come after the article went viral, and he had accepted not as an executive, but as a witness. The room was full community leaders, former whistleblowers, young activists, old veterans. They didn't want PR gloss, they wanted truth. And Marcus gave it. He told them about the silence that screams inside boardrooms, about how language could liberate or be used as a cage. He spoke of trust betrayed from within, of the long walk from being someone's symbol to becoming your own person again. When he finished, a woman in her late 60s stood. Her voice trembled, not from age but from contained fire. "They think because we're tired, we're done," she said. "But we're just getting started, and now you're in it with us." Marcus nodded. "Always was. Yes." Back at Hamilton, the audit teams were digging deeper. Elena led a smaller internal group tracking financial oddities, and what they found next made Marcus pause. A link between one of the oldest board members, Jonah Riles, and a defense subcontractor flagged twice for unethical sourcing abroad. Worse, a pipeline of money routed discreetly through charitable arms connected to Hamilton's philanthropic foundation. It wasn't just about greed anymore. It was about exploitation, masked as generosity. Rose stared at the evidence late that evening, her fingers curled around a pen she wasn't writing with. "We have to go external with this," she finally said. "Not just the press, oversight committees. This is federal." "If we do that," Marcus replied, "we might take the whole company down with it." "Then so be it," she said. "It's not a company if it's built on silence. It's a facade." The next day, Marcus was summoned to a board session. He knew before walking in that this wasn't routine. 4 members were present physically, 3 virtually, and sitting at the far end was Jonah Riles himself, flanked by his legal team. The air was tight with tension. The chairman cleared his throat. "Mr. Young, we've reviewed your internal findings. They are concerning. However, such allegations without full legal context can cause significant reputational damage." Marcus looked around. "So can ignoring them." Jonah leaned forward. "You're playing with fire, son." Marcus met his gaze. "I was forged in it, sir. Don't assume I burn the way you do." For a moment, no one moved. Then Rose stood. "Mr. Riles, effective immediately, your access to all Hamilton systems is suspended pending a formal review. Legal protocol will follow. This company will not protect those who abuse its trust." Jonah opened his mouth to speak, but the chairman raised a hand. "The board supports this decision," he said flatly. "Unanimously." Marcus didn't smile. He simply turned and walked out, his steps measured, his back straight. That night, the news broke. Hamilton Global's internal reform, led by Marcus Young and Rose Wallace, had uncovered potentially criminal links between certain board members and unethical corporate partnerships. The media went into a frenzy, but for the first time, the frenzy was not one of scandal but of hope. They weren't tearing a man down. They were watching something rise from beneath the rubble. At home, Marcus sat with his laptop open, an email draft addressed to his old commanding officer. He hadn't spoken to the man in years, but tonight felt like a bridge to a part of his life he'd never truly reconciled. He typed slowly, "Sir, you once told me that real battles don't end with victory. They end when the truth outlives the lies. I think I finally understand what you meant. It's not over, but we've begun something, and that has to matter." "Oh." He hit send, closed the laptop, and poured himself a cup of tea. No whiskey, no celebration, just quiet, because real change doesn't roar. It hums, steady and relentless, in every broken hallway and every rebuilt soul. Marcus stood at the threshold of the old elevator shaft beneath Hamilton's archive wing, the air thick with dust and the scent of forgotten paper. The dim hum of fluorescent lighting buzzed above him, flickering faintly like a heartbeat about to give out. The room had once been a records hall, repurposed and then abandoned again. But now it was the unlikely ground zero of the next storm. Elena's quiet voice echoed from behind him. We traced the donor logs. All those shell charities? Their grants were approved right here, 3 floors underground. Someone thought out of sight meant out of reach. Marcus took a breath. Then let's reach. They moved through rows of cabinets, index drawers, locked compartments lined with folders yellowed at the edges. Some bore official stamps, others were handwritten, fast, careless, coded. Marcus opened one labeled with an innocuous phrase, Legacy Fund Allocations, 2014. Inside were payout memos routed through third-party legal firms, each with strange omissions. Dates without recipients, sums without purpose, and yet every signature at the bottom bore the same 3 letters, J.R., Jonah Riles. Elena shook her head. This isn't just corruption, this is architecture. He built a system meant to vanish the second someone looked. Back upstairs, the building felt different. More eyes on him, some curious, some cautious. Marcus knew the narrative had shifted, not just in headlines but in whispers. To some, he was the man dragging skeletons from closets. To others, he was the one kicking open doors they had spent careers closing. Rose met him in the corridor, phone to her ear, nodding slowly. When she hung up, her expression was unreadable. The DOJ's opened an official inquiry. Grand jury level. We're under subpoena now, not just observation. Does that mean we're targets? He asked. No, she replied. It means we're witnesses, but that line can blur fast. Later that day, in a boardroom stripped of portraits and prestige, Marcus sat with 2 federal agents. They were sharp-eyed, soft-voiced, methodical, the kind that asked the same question twice, once for the answer, once for the reaction. They walked him through what they already knew about Riles, about the shell accounts, even about Halvin. But then came a name Marcus hadn't expected. Do you know a Bernard Ashford? One of the agents asked. Marcus blinked. Yes, he was my commanding officer, retired 6 years ago. We have reason to believe he was contacted by a private consulting firm under contract with Hamilton's European arm. That firm has ties to offshore data laundering. Marcus leaned back slowly. Are you saying Bernard's involved? We're saying someone's using him or his past as a door. That night, Marcus sat alone in his apartment, rereading his last message to Bernard. The reply had never come. He opened his laptop and typed again. Sir, something's happening. I need to know, are you safe or are you in it? He hesitated, then deleted the last sentence. No guilt, no implication. Just, please reply. In the days that followed, the pressure cooker boiled over. One of Hamilton's legacy partners, a philanthropic ambassador named Miriam Knox, resigned suddenly. Her departure sparked media interest and then outrage when it was revealed she had personally overseen funding to education programs that never existed. Programs that, on paper, serviced low-income Black and Latino communities. In truth, the money had circled back into investment fronts. Rose stood before reporters, pale but resolute. What happened under Hamilton's roof is a betrayal not just of business ethics, but of the people we claim to serve. We are not here to bury it. We are here to expose it, clean it, and never let it return. Meanwhile, Marcus was summoned again not by internal forces, but by the very communities Hamilton had failed. A meeting had been called in Newark, at an old church now used as a neighborhood forum. Elders, activists, former scholarship recipients, and those who had once believed in Hamilton's promise came to listen, but also to confront. A man stood, mid-40s, coat patched at the shoulder, eyes sharp. You expect us to believe you now, after years of silence? Marcus didn't flinch. Number, I don't expect belief. I expect accountability, and I'll earn the rest. The man narrowed his eyes. Why now? Because justice doesn't care when you wake up, only that you don't go back to sleep. Andre. That answer spread, not as a quote, as a pulse. Inside Hamilton, Rose moved to restructure the board. Legal teams drafted new bylaws. A third-party transparency panel was initiated, but not all welcomed the change. An anonymous letter reached Marcus's office, a printed page with a single sentence. You expose one more name, and she pays the price. Attached was a photo of Rose, taken that very morning, getting into her car. Marcus handed the letter to security, to the FBI, to Rose herself. But inside, he felt the heat again, the kind that told him this was no longer a professional war. It was personal. Someone wasn't just covering tracks. They were preparing to bury people with them. He met with Rose late that night, in her kitchen. No suits, no files. Just 2 cups of tea and a silence that hurt more than noise. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Staying, fighting." Marcus looked at her. "Only when I think about what might happen to you." She smiled sadly. "Then you're human." He reached for his phone, scrolling past recent calls until he found it, Caleb. He typed, "I need everything. Backgrounds, enemies, patterns. Whoever's watching her, I want to be watching them first." Before sleeping, Marcus stood at his window, staring out across the city. It looked peaceful, but he knew better. Peace was what they used to hide the next blow, and it was coming. He could feel it in his bones, the same way soldiers smell rain before it falls. Marcus stood at the corner of East 42nd Street and Lexington, staring at the revolving glass doors of the Hamilton building like a man about to walk into a courtroom, not an office. The morning air was cold, brittle, the kind that snapped against the skin and reminded you were still alive. He didn't look like a man at war. He wore his usual charcoal overcoat, leather gloves, a black briefcase in his hand. But every step he took felt heavier than the last, not because of fear, but because of what he now knew. The letter wasn't a bluff. The surveillance photo of Rose had been time-stamped and geolocated with precision only possible through internal access. Someone wasn't just watching, they had clearance. And that meant the enemy wasn't out there. It was inside. The elevator ride felt longer than usual, even though he was alone. As the doors opened on the executive floor, he noticed it instantly, the subtle hush, the way heads turned too quickly, the way the assistants avoided eye contact. Paranoia didn't need proof. It just needed silence. Elena met him halfway down the corridor, her face pale. "We have another problem," she whispered. "Caleb pulled the list you asked for. 3 former Hamilton security contractors with clearance level 4 or higher have suddenly gone dark. No forwarding employment, no activity logs. And one of them used to run surveillance for the DOJ. Marcus didn't blink. Names? Sending them now. Good. I want everything on them by this afternoon. I don't care if it's a coffee receipt from 2008. Bring it." By noon, Rose had convened an emergency legal panel. It was off-book, private. Only 4 people in the room, her, Marcus, their internal counsel, and a DOJ compliance liaison who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The walls were soundproof, but the conversation cut through steel. "If someone inside is facilitating intimidation tactics," Rose said, "we're not just facing corporate collapse. We're facing criminal conspiracy charges for failing to act." The DOJ rep leaned forward. "And if you go public too early, you risk contaminating evidence, or worse, alerting your target and getting someone hurt." The letter wasn't a warning. It was a leash. Marcus felt the heat behind his eyes, the kind that didn't burn, it boiled. "So what do you suggest? Wait until they move again?" "No," the rep said. "We set bait, make them move where we can see them." That evening, Hamilton's internal server went down for 94 seconds. A planned update, or so the tech team claimed. But Marcus was already in the basement, where the physical servers were kept. A backup camera, hidden in a vent and placed 3 weeks earlier by Elena, caught a shadow passing through the server room during the exact minute of the blackout. The figure wore standard IT attire, face masked, but the badge light flickered. Zooming in revealed a partial name, Hall. Marcus stared at the screen. "Hollis," he muttered. "Kyle Hollis, security analyst, terminated in 2020. Elena blinked. "That's one of the names Caleb flagged. So why is he back in the building? Because someone let him in." The next morning, Marcus met Rose at her apartment before dawn. Not at the office, not in public. He handed her a burner phone. "If they're tracking anything linked to Hamilton servers, we need secure lines." She accepted it silently, then poured him coffee. "No sugar, no milk. They've been using fear to keep us reactive," she said. "What if we flipped it?" "How?" "We go live. A press event, but not just a statement, real-time disclosure. We release the documents, financial trails, memos, everything we've got, unredacted, broadcast it, stream it, and make it so loud they can't suppress it." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You want to provoke them? Number, I want to strip them of shadows." 3 days later, The world watched as Hamilton's CEO and Chief Integrity Officer stood side by side in front of a live camera feed streamed across 5 major platforms. Behind them, screens rolled slides of internal documents, wire transfers, email chains, and whistleblower testimonies. Rose's voice never cracked. Marcus read statements from victims, some posthumous. They named names, they showed numbers, they bled truth. The reaction was immediate. News outlets exploded. The stock dropped. But donations poured in from activists and citizens alike. Hamilton's image had shattered, but not in disgrace, in rebirth. But the fight wasn't over. That night, Rose's driver was attacked in the parking structure beneath her residence. He survived, a concussion, a broken rib. But his security badge had been taken. The message was clear. We can still reach you. Marcus didn't sleep. He sat in her living room, a sidearm on the coffee table. Not legal, not corporate, personal. He checked the locks, the cameras, every window. They won't stop, she said quietly. Then neither will I. You said you didn't burn like them, she whispered. But I think you do, just cleaner. Marcus looked at her. Number I burn for different things. When dawn broke, the city seemed quieter. But Marcus knew that quiet was a lie. The kind told before sirens, before glass breaks, before someone blinks and someone bleeds. And he wasn't going to blink, not anymore. The rain hit the windows of the safe house like whispered gunshots, steady and low. Marcus stood by the single pane of glass, watching droplets race down like nervous runners. Somewhere below, in the alley, a black SUV idled too long, too quiet. He didn't blink. He simply shifted slightly so the corner of the room's mirror reflected the license plate, Colorado tags. That car had no business being here. Elena, seated at the end of the couch with a laptop warming her knees, looked up. They're scanning data center blueprints now, not for access, just to erase logs. One more sweep and they'll wipe every digital footprint Kyle Hollis ever left behind, including the ones that prove he accessed the surveillance feeds from inside the legal department's intranet. Marcus's voice was low. We're not fast enough. They're ahead by 2 moves, always. Elena tilted her head. Then maybe it's time we change the game. Make it personal. The plan unfolded within hours. Rose made the call. Not to lawyers, not to board members. To her father, Judge William Thatcher. Retired circuit court. Old school, straight-backed, razor-sharp mind at 81. He picked up on the second ring. So the girl finally calls, he said, half teasing, half thunder. Dad, I need a name expunged. Officially, on record, Kyle Hollis. I need you to make it disappear from the wrong places and appear in the right ones. There was a pause. And who's the lion you're running with now? Marcus. Ah, the one with the war eyes. I trust him, even if the system doesn't. By noon, Hollis's sealed employment history was reactivated under subpoena authority. That unlocked a data trail that hadn't been touched in 4 years. Travel logs, visitor passes, corporate card transactions. One stood out. A flight to Zurich paid through a dormant Hamilton sub-account. Marcus followed the string. Zurich meant Albrecht Systems, a contractor buried in international finance cloaks, suspected of laundering private political donations. If Hollis had gone there, he wasn't working alone. They're funneling more than bribes, Marcus muttered. They're moving identities, scrubbing ghosts clean. That evening, Marcus walked into Hamilton's 19th floor server annex with a fake badge and a purpose. Security had been told he was there to audit redundancies. The truth was uglier. Hidden in the patch panel was a relay device, small, wireless, quietly transmitting fragments of internal data out to a third-party satellite. He photographed it, then removed it. Not yanked, gently, surgically, so it wouldn't alert whoever was on the other end. Then he tucked it into a sealed Faraday pouch and left the room like nothing happened. Elena decrypted it within an hour. The stream was routing not to Zurich, but to Alexandria, Virginia, Homeland Security proxy network. Someone inside the government was watching Hamilton either to help them or to help themselves. We just tripped a landmine, Elena whispered. This isn't just corporate. This is federal. Meanwhile, Rose went on record again, this time in a live interview with NPR. Her tone was measured, composed, but behind every syllable was a reckoning. When people say the system is broken, I ask who broke it, because systems don't fail. They're designed. And somewhere along the way, ours was designed to punish the honest and protect the powerful. The host hesitated. Is that why you've refused the private settlements? Rose looked into the camera lens. You can't buy silence from someone who's already lost everything worth silencing. That quote hit the networks hard. Social media exploded. For every call to cancel Hamilton, there were two praising the exposure, the bravery. But the threats intensified. Caleb intercepted a message routed through an encrypted app used by ex-military contractors. It had no names, only coordinates, and one sentence. Strike at source, not shield. Marcus read it aloud and looked at Rose. They mean you. Rose stared back. Then they forgot I'm not made of glass. The next morning, a package arrived at Marcus's apartment. No return address. Inside, a single cassette tape, an old model recorder, and a note that read, "Listen, then decide who's worth saving." He played it once, then again. The voice was unmistakable. Bernard Ashford, his old CO. The tape was a confession, disjointed, maybe coerced, but it implicated a chain of deals going back 12 years. Defense contracts, fake procurement orders, even a military-backed startup that somehow ended up as a Hamilton affiliate. Bernard's last words on the tape were haunting. If you're hearing this, I'm already gone. But if you expose them, don't stop halfway. They'd rather be buried than uncovered. 1. Marcus closed his eyes and leaned back. The past wasn't just haunting him now, it was bleeding into the present, and the lines were blurring. Friend, traitor, victim, pawn. Rose entered the room, saw his face, and sat beside him. What did he say? Marcus held the tape in his palm like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He said not to stop halfway. He knew this would come. Maybe he even planned for it. Rose looked at him. Then what do we do? Marcus didn't answer right away. He just stared at the recorder. Then finally, his voice a whisper, we finish it, all the way. Outside, the city was still humming, unaware, but not for long. At 3:17 a.m., the plan began with a single keystroke. Elena's fingers hovered just above the enter key, hesitation flickering across her face for only a second before she pressed down. In that instant, a cloned data packet containing falsified financial records, scrubbed metadata, and the illusion of a whistleblower's signature began transmitting to 6 carefully selected inboxes, 2 inside Hamilton, 3 inside the Department of Justice, and 1 to a journalist whose silence could no longer be bought. Marcus stood behind her, arms crossed, his gaze fixated on the code as if willing it to reach its target before anyone could intercept. Once that's in their hands, there's no pulling back, Elena whispered. This is the match. Everything burns or nothing does. Let it burn, Marcus replied, his voice like gravel underfoot. Across the room, Rose sat near the fireplace, her face lit only by the flicker of the flames and the quiet hum of her thoughts. The cassette tape Marcus received still sat on the table beside her, the plastic cracked now, a relic after being copied, backed up, and secured in 5 different offline drives. But it wasn't just a relic, it was leverage. Bernard Ashford's voice had become the ghost in the room, forcing them to confront the truth. The corruption ran deeper than any of them had anticipated. Judge Thatcher had done his part, burying Kyle Hollis's files beneath a mountain of redacted casework. But even he couldn't block the rising tide of inquiries now. Too many eyes had turned. Too many questions were being whispered in hallways. Hamilton's top brass began to squirm. The inboxes accepted the payload one by one, green confirmations blinking across the screen. Elena exhaled, fingers trembling now that it was done. Across the room, Rose stood, brushing imaginary dust off her sleeve, though her thoughts were clearly elsewhere. What happens next? She asked. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the table, picked up the cracked cassette case, and turned it in his hand. We just lit the signal fire. Now we wait to see who shows up to kill it. Outside, a thin fog clung to the trees lining the ridge. The safe house was remote, intentionally so, but even isolation felt fragile now. Kyle had checked in earlier, confirming that Sylvia's ghost accounts had pinged back the bait was noticed. Someone inside Hamilton had already accessed the decoy files. They think the data is legit, Elena said, tapping into a closed monitoring channel. Their firewall tagged it as a breach, not a hoax. That means they're scrambling. Rose moved toward the table, eyes hardening. Then the second phase starts now. She reached into her coat pocket and withdrew a slim drive silver, unmarked, except for a small etched symbol, 3 overlapping triangles, the logo of Hamilton's black-budget subsidiary, Vespex Research. "We leak this next," she said. "The testing protocols. The real ones." Marcus frowned. "That's the one Hollis pulled before disappearing?" "Yes. And it's the one that names names. Drug interactions, mortality rates, regional targeting. It's going to blow a hole through the company's spine," Elena said. "But we'll be exposed, too. No proxy IPs left. Once this goes out, they'll know exactly who triggered it." Rose looked around the room. "They already know. This just removes the pretense." They agreed on 4 a.m. as the drop time. Enough of a gap to monitor Hamilton's immediate response to the first file, but soon enough to prevent containment. Grace Latimer had already been looped in. She would break the second file as a companion piece to her upcoming exposé titled The Algorithm of Sacrifice. The headline alone was enough to make PR departments flinch. Marcus stepped outside, the cold air biting his face, the weight of what they were doing pressing hard against his chest. It wasn't just about retaliation anymore. This was systemic. The cassette tape had proven that the deaths weren't oversights, they were equations. Cost-benefit calculations hidden inside risk assessment frameworks. Rose joined him, pulling her coat tighter. "You think people will care?" she asked. "If we show them everything, will it change anything?" He didn't answer at first. Then, "They won't want to believe it. That their medicines, their leaders, their safety nets are built on someone else's ruin. But once they see it, they can't unsee it. That's what matters." A movement in the trees caught his eye. Just a fox. Still, his hand hovered near the holster under his coat. Paranoia was no longer paranoia. It was survival. Inside, Elena set the final automation sequence. The drive's contents would upload in 5 bursts to different encrypted newsrooms and public archives. Simultaneously, Caleb would trigger the social accounts of 6 verified medical ethicists to post the data with annotations. No hashtags, no slogans, just truth. At 3:59 a.m., Rose walked over to the terminal. "Once this starts," she said, "we don't sleep again." Elena gave a sharp nod. "Then let's wake them up." At 4 hours 0 minutes and 1 second a.m., the world changed. The first outlet to break the news was Global Medical Forum, a journal read by scientists and ignored by politicians until now. Their headline, "Targeted Trials, a Pattern of Predation." Within 20 minutes, the Department of Health's internal server pinged with an emergency bulletin. 30 minutes later, Hamilton's corporate site went dark. Internally, board members were already panicking. A text chain between executives later recovered read, "Who authorized Black Funnel? Shut it down now. Do not respond publicly yet. Scrub Vespex." At 4:45 a.m., Grace Latimer's article dropped. Its second paragraph named Kyle Hollis. Its third paragraph mentioned Bernard Ashford. By sunrise, Rose's name was trending. She didn't watch it happen. She sat in the corner of the room, scrolling slowly through an archive of clinical photos from the original trial sites. Her father's name was there, his chart. Her thumb hovered over a line. Subject responded poorly to VXN3. Follow-up, discouraged. She closed the file. Then stood. Marcus turned to her. "They'll counter soon, lie, threaten, maybe even settle." "They won't have time," she replied, "because we're not done yet." She held up a second drive. Elena's eyes widened. "What is that?" "The boardroom audio files, the ones with direct references to federal liaisons, the kickbacks, the off-the-record approvals." Marcus stepped closer. "That was supposed to be our insurance." "It still is," Rose said. "Insurance for the people, not for us." At 5:12 a.m., the third wave went live. Anonymous drops to international watchdogs, policy groups, and legal scholars. Within the hour, 3 class action lawsuits were filed in different jurisdictions. A fourth came before noon. By then, Hamilton's CEO had released a cold statement denouncing the leaks as irresponsible and legally questionable. But it was too late. Rose and Marcus had changed the tempo, and in Washington, key senators were suddenly pushing for emergency hearings. At 6:03 a.m., Elena received a final alert. An internal Hamilton mail server had flagged the name Danvers as a threat tag across 5 departments. She turned to Rose. "You're officially the enemy now." Rose smiled without warmth. "Good. That means they're paying attention. Outside, the sun finally cracked through the tree line, casting long shadows over the snow. But inside the firelit room, they no longer feared the dark. The match had been struck, and now the flame was spreading. The morning after the data leak, the city seemed unnaturally quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that hummed like a warning beneath your skin. Marcus felt it before he even opened his eyes. His phone buzzed with unread messages, encrypted threads flashing red, burner lines blinking to life one after another. Something had shifted. Not just a reaction, retaliation. Rose stood in the hallway, already dressed in a charcoal gray suit, coffee untouched on the counter beside her. She didn't speak at first, just nodded toward the window where a drone hovered for a split second too long before disappearing. "They're watching again," she said finally. Marcus stepped beside her, arms folded. "Let them. We want them nervous." But nervous wasn't the same as sloppy, and Hamilton's board wasn't about to go down quietly. News vans were now parked outside the corporate tower, and Caleb reported 2 former whistleblowers had disappeared from public access, scrubbed, silenced, possibly worse. Elena confirmed that Hamilton's internal security team had activated a program known only as Reckoner, a sweep protocol used to identify and eliminate high-risk liabilities, including former employees like Kyle Hollis. "They've moved beyond defense," she said. "Now they're hunting." The team met in the back of an old church Marcus once used as a safe house. Its stained glass windows faded, its pews cracked, but its silence reliable. Judge Thatcher joined them, cane in hand, and placed a worn folder on the altar. "What you're about to see never left military intelligence, but Bernard made sure it found its way to me." Inside were photos, hand-typed memos, transcripts, evidence of Operation Shadow Merchant, a covert funding loop that funneled federal resources into private firms under false pretenses. Hamilton wasn't just complicit, they were the prototype. "That's motive," Marcus muttered, flipping through the documents. "They've been laundering patriotism into profit." Rose paced slowly. "This is it. This is where we corner them. We go public. Full disclosure. Not a leak. A firestorm." Judge Thatcher raised a hand. "You sure you're ready for that, girl? Because once it's out there, you'll be target number 1. And so will everyone who stood beside you." "That's already true," she answered. "The only difference now is that they'll know we're not afraid." The plan took shape faster than expected. That night, Rose was scheduled to speak at a gala, ironically, for corporate transparency. Hamilton had insisted she show face, to maintain appearances, to prove their house wasn't burning down. What they didn't know was that Rose intended to burn it down from the inside. Elena and Caleb wired the venue for full live streaming capability. Marcus secured the exit routes. Judge Thatcher arranged for a closed-door pre-briefing with 2 federal prosecutors who would be watching. And beneath Rose's gown, she wore a mic. Hidden, live, untouchable. As she stepped onto the stage, the crowd of executives and investors rose in applause, oblivious. She smiled a practiced, distant thing and began. "Tonight," she said, "we celebrate accountability. But it's easy to applaud that word in rooms like this. Harder to live by it when the curtains fall." She took a breath, glancing toward Marcus near the back. He nodded once. "The signal. I want to tell you a story," she continued, "about a man who worked 20 years in silence, erasing the messes of men twice his salary. A man who spoke 9 languages but was told to keep his mouth shut. A man who knew too much and paid the price for it." The room shifted. Uncomfortable murmurs began. On every screen, a symbol flashed the logo of the Shadow Merchant files. One by one, pages began appearing, auto-fed from a drive Elena had hidden inside the gala's AV booth. "These documents," Rose said, "detail Hamilton's direct involvement in a covert operation to channel government funds into private pockets. Some of you in this room signed those papers. Others profited off the backs of men like Kyle Hollis. And tonight, we are done pretending." The crowd erupted, not in applause, but gasps. Some people rose to leave. Others fumbled for their phones. Security whispered into earpieces. But Marcus stood firm, hand on his waist, watching every move. Then the unexpected happened. A man in the back pulled a badge federal. "This event is now under investigation," he announced. "Remain seated." Panic surged. Sirens in the distance grew louder. Rose stepped back from the podium, her face calm, collected, unafraid. She met Marcus's eyes. For the first time since they started this war, the storm had broken in their favor. The moment the federal badge was raised and the room descended into chaos, Rose remained perfectly still. Her pulse pounded, but her face betrayed none of it. She had planned for this, lived through it in her mind 1,000 times. What she hadn't accounted for was the silence that followed the noise, an eerie, stunned hush as powerful men and women realized that the game they had controlled for decades was no longer theirs. As agents moved through the crowd, politely but firmly asking everyone to stay seated, Marcus slipped out through the side door. His job wasn't finished. Elena was already rerouting the live feed, ensuring that the gala's exposé wouldn't be just a spectacle for those in tuxedos. It was now broadcast on multiple independent news channels, online platforms, and sent directly to the inboxes of key investigative reporters who couldn't be bought. Somewhere in the building's lower levels, Caleb worked furiously to secure backup footage. "They'll try to shut the stream," he had said, fingers flying across his keyboard, "but they can't shut all of it, not in time." Back in the main hall, Rose stood face to face with Hamilton's interim COO, Charles Beckman, a man with the kind of smile that always looked rehearsed. "You think this stunt will save your reputation?" he hissed under his breath. "You just committed career suicide." Rose leaned closer, her voice a calm whisper. "My reputation isn't what I'm trying to save." Then she turned and walked away, past panicked donors, stunned executives, and the camera flashes that would soon plaster her face across every major news outlet in the country. Outside, Marcus was waiting near the car, engine already running. She slid in beside him, exhaling slowly. "It's done," she said. "Not yet," Marcus replied. "They haven't hit back." "They will." That hit came faster than expected. By morning, media outlets were already questioning the authenticity of the leaked files. A well-orchestrated PR counterstrike painted Rose as an unstable executive with a vendetta, Marcus as a disgruntled former employee, and the whistleblower network as radicalized saboteurs. "We knew this would happen," Elena said, pacing in the safe house, phone pressed to her ear. "They'll flood the narrative with doubt, delay investigations, push hearings down the calendar until everyone forgets. That's their playbook." "So we flip it," Marcus said. "We bring them something they can't spin." Judge Thatcher walked in then, carrying a small leather case. "You want undeniable? Try this." Inside was a voice recorder, not digital, analog. The tape hissed slightly as it played, then cleared to reveal a voice Bernard Ashford himself discussing payouts, names, dates, more than evidence. "Confession. Where the hell did you get this?" Elena asked. "From someone who knew he wouldn't live long enough to testify," the judge replied. "He gave it to me years ago. Said, 'Hold this for the day when the truth finally outweighs the danger.' That day just arrived." Rose took the recorder, her hands trembling slightly for the first time. "We release this?" Marcus nodded. "On our terms. But first, we find Kyle Hollis." The mention of Kyle's name hit the room like a pulse. He had vanished a year ago, after threatening to go public, after sending the first wave of encrypted data Marcus had intercepted. Some believed he was dead. Others believed Hamilton had locked him away, physically or financially. But now, they had reason to believe he was alive and hidden somewhere in Nevada, under an alias, protected by one of Hamilton's shell organizations. "If Kyle testifies," Elena said, "it's game over." "Then we find him," Rose said, her voice steel. Marcus looked at her, eyes narrowing. "You ready to go back into the fire?" She met his gaze without flinching. "We never left." They split into two teams. Marcus and Rose headed west, tracking leads from old correspondence and bank transfers that seemed to disappear into the desert. Elena and Caleb stayed behind to manage the press chaos, reinforcing the truth with documents, tapes, and expert testimonies. Every hour mattered. Every delay gave Hamilton time to pivot. Driving through the vast, empty roads of Nevada, Rose found herself thinking about the first time she met Marcus, not in the office, but in the parking garage, when he spoke to her in flawless Japanese, dismantling her assumptions in a single breath. "You ever regret it?" she asked suddenly, eyes on the horizon. "What? Speaking up?" "No," she said softly. "Staying in it, fighting this war instead of walking away." Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Regret is for people who have the luxury of safety. I never did." They drove in silence for a while. Then Marcus pointed ahead. There, the compound. It was a converted RV park, surrounded by fencing and cameras, bland and unassuming. But Marcus recognized the name on the mailbox, one of the aliases Kyle had used during his time inside. They approached carefully. No guards, no dogs. Just wind and the creak of sun-bleached metal. When they knocked, there was no answer. But a moment later, the door creaked open. A man stood there, bearded, thin, eyes sunken but alert. He recognized Marcus immediately. "I told you not to come," he said. "And I told you we would," Marcus replied. Kyle looked at Rose, his expression unreadable. "So, it's really happening, isn't it?" "It already did," she said. "Now we need you to finish it." Kyle didn't answer at first. Then he stepped back and opened the door wider. Then, "Come in, and close it behind you." The door shut. The storm outside finally met the reckoning within. The air inside Kyle Hollis's trailer was thick with old dust and unspoken memories. The walls were lined with books, economics, history, even Japanese haiku collections worn and annotated in a hand Marcus immediately recognized. Rose stood near the center of the room, her heels silent on the faded carpet, eyes taking in every detail with a stillness that unnerved even Kyle. "You look tired," she finally said. Kyle smirked. "Being erased takes a toll." Marcus moved to the kitchen, pouring water from a plastic jug into chipped mugs. "We don't have long," he said. "The DOJ is teetering. Your name is already on their radar again. You come forward now with everything you could tip the scale." Kyle took the mug, staring into it like it held answers. "And if I do, what happens to me? They'll come after me again, harder. I barely survived last time." "This time," Rose said firmly, "you're not alone." Kyle's eyes shifted to her. "And that's supposed to matter?" "Yes," she said, "because it's not just about you anymore. There are families who lost everything because they believed Hamilton was clean. People who paid into pensions that vanished. Veterans whose benefits were stolen. Communities poisoned by contracts you signed without knowing the chemicals dumped would never be cleaned up. You didn't pull the trigger, Kyle, but you handed them the bullets." The silence that followed was heavier than the Nevada sun. Marcus didn't flinch. Neither did Rose. Kyle finally set the mug down. "I kept a copy," he said, "of the master file, not on any cloud. Air-gapped, hidden in a safe beneath this floor. Names, payments, dates, voice recordings, everything." "Then we get it out," Marcus said. Kyle hesitated. "There's something else. The night I disappeared, Bernard Ashford left me a message. He knew I was going to flip. Said if I did, I needed to make sure the foundation didn't collapse entirely. I didn't understand what he meant, until now." He crouched near a floorboard, pried it up with a screwdriver, and retrieved a small black box, unlabeled, old-fashioned, locked with a code only he knew. He entered the numbers with trembling fingers, then handed it to Marcus. Inside were thumb drives, microcassettes, and a small, sealed envelope. Rose opened it, reading the handwritten note aloud. "If this ends up in the wrong hands, deny everything. But if it ends up in the right ones, you know what to do." She looked up. "We're the right hands now." They didn't wait. Within hours, the data was backed up across multiple secure locations. Elena, speaking through a scrambled line, confirmed the files were already being verified by a digital forensics team. "This is it," she said. "This isn't just a fire. This is the flood." But Hamilton didn't go quietly. That evening, 3 black SUVs pulled up across from the compound. No logos, no plates, just engines idling, and men in dark clothing watching from the shadows. Marcus stood at the window. "They found us." "How?" Rose asked. "Doesn't matter," he replied. "We move now. Kyle, grab what you need. We go through the back." But Kyle was already staring at the envelope again, as if seeing something deeper. "I think I know what Ashford meant," he murmured. "There's a backup account, one I never touched because it wasn't in my name. It's a fund, hidden under a fake nonprofit. It's got more than just hush money, it's got control documents, blackmail material, even on federal officials." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Then we need that too." They moved fast, out the back, through the scrubland, to a rental truck Marcus had stashed for emergencies. The drive back toward Las Vegas was tense. Every car behind them suspect, every light a possible ambush. But they made it. By dawn, the files were uploaded to secure channels. A full package testimony, evidence, names was sent to the DOJ, the Senate Oversight Committee, and 3 major news networks. Rose stood outside the safe house, watching the sun rise, her blazer still dusty from the desert. "Do you think they'll act?" she asked. Marcus stood beside her, arms crossed. "They'll have no choice." "They always have a choice," she said bitterly. "It's just a matter of who pays for it." Behind them, Kyle sat quietly with Elena, recording a full sworn video statement. His voice shook at first but grew steadier as he detailed every dollar, every order, every compromise. "I was a coward," he admitted, eyes red. "But today I choose not to be." Rose listened from the hall. She felt something shift inside her, not closure, not yet, but momentum, a turning of the wheel. She stepped outside again, phone in hand. "Time to call the press," she said. "Tell them the storm has a name now." Marcus didn't smile. He rarely did. But in that moment, he looked at her with something close to pride. "Let's finish what we started." The headlines would come fast. "Insider exposes Hamilton Empire. Files leak implicates top officials. CEO turned whistleblower brings truth to light." But Rose knew better than to celebrate early. The empire might shake, but the battle had just entered its most dangerous phase. Now, the enemy was desperate, and a desperate man is the most dangerous kind. Ready to continue with. The email dropped at 6:43 a.m. No subject line, no sender. Just a single sentence in the body. "You've made the wrong enemy." Rose read it once, twice, and then again, cold creeping across her spine. Marcus looked over her shoulder. "They're starting the smear." And they did. Within hours, social media accounts were flooded with edited clips, spliced recordings of Marcus speaking foreign languages twisted to sound menacing. Conspiracy blogs lit up. Claims that he was a foreign agent, a plant sent to infiltrate American institutions. Rose's own record was dragged into the light-twisted headlines, calling her a traitor to her class, accusing her of manipulating a grieving public for profit. "It's coordinated," Elena said through the encrypted line. "Some of these accounts were dormant for years, all activated in sequence. They've been waiting for this moment." Marcus leaned against the wall, arms folded. They don't want the truth dead. They want it discredited, buried beneath noise. At DOJ headquarters, the response was tepid at best. The package had been received. The files were under review. But whispers reached Rose's ears. Certain senior officials were calling the evidence compromised. Others claimed it was manufactured by disgruntled employees. Kyle Hollis, now in safe-house custody, watched the news unfold in silence. "They're going to erase me again," he said, "just like last time." "No," Rose replied, voice firm. "This time, the spotlight is wide enough that they can't turn it off." But that night, the safe-house perimeter alarm tripped. Marcus grabbed his firearm, motioned to Rose and Kyle to take cover. A lone drone hovered outside, silent and sleek, too far for a slingshot, too close for comfort. Marcus took it down with a rifle shot to the battery core. The explosion was small, but the message was deafening. "They know where we are." Elena rerouted them to a cabin in the Colorado mountains off-grid, low-tech, untraceable. "You'll be safe there for now," she said. "But keep Kyle talking. Every hour he delays is another opening for them to move." The next morning, a breakthrough came not from the DOJ, but from the people. A retired military analyst named Grace Latimer, known for exposing cover-ups in the defense sector, released an independent analysis of the files. Her video broke down the data chain, verified timestamps, authenticated signatures. "This isn't just credible," she said. "It's damning." The video hit 4 million views in 2 days, and the tide began to turn. Public pressure surged. Hashtags calling for full investigation trended nationwide. Former Hamilton employees came forward, emboldened by Grace's courage. A class action suit was filed. Then, the final card. Judge Thatcher was caught on a hot mic, referring to burying the Hollis mess before it spreads. The leak shattered his career. DOJ was forced to act. A special counsel was appointed. Subpoenas reigned, and suddenly, what had been a whisper became a roar. But with exposure came escalation. One of the whistleblowers, a mid-level accountant named Jeremy Fields, was found unconscious in his garage carbon monoxide poisoning, labeled a suicide. But Marcus recognized the pattern. "They're cleaning up," he said, one by one. Rose stood before a bank of monitors in the new cabin, watching the names roll in victims, survivors, collaborators, and pawns. "We need to flip someone higher," she said, "someone they fear." That someone turned out to be Sylvia Meade Hamilton's former VP of Strategic Assets, fired 2 years ago, paid off, forgotten. But Elena found her, living quietly in Sedona. At first, Sylvia refused to talk. "I signed NDAs thicker than Bibles," she said. "If I speak, I lose everything. You already lost your soul," Marcus said bluntly. Sylvia glared. "And what have you risked?" "Everything," Rose answered before Marcus could. "Our names, our safety, our careers. And for what? A chance, just one, that someone like you might finally do the right thing." Sylvia didn't respond, but a day later, she arrived at the cabin with a flash drive and a manila folder. "I kept backups," she said, out of spite. Inside the folder were routing numbers, offshore accounts, and a pattern that matched one of Kyle's sealed memos. The slush fund Kyle mentioned wasn't just blackmail, it was buying judicial silence. Bribes to judges, even 2 senators. "This ends careers," Marcus muttered. "It ends legacies," Sylvia corrected, "and possibly our lives." That night, Rose drafted a new statement. It was sharp, pointed, and unapologetic. She didn't beg for belief, she demanded accountability. "We are not asking for justice," she wrote. "We are reminding you it is owed." The statement was published across 4 outlets. The Washington Herald ran it with the headline, "Rose Danvers Fights Back." Public support exploded. But in the shadows, Hamilton's loyalists were mobilizing. One leaked memo showed plans for containment, not reform. Another referenced severing the chain. Marcus knew what that meant. They're coming for Kyle. Security was doubled. Sylvia stayed close. Elena wired alerts to every movement near the cabin. But on the second night, just past 2 a.m., they heard the crunch of gravel outside. Rose grabbed the emergency flashlight, signaling the back. Marcus flanked the door, weapon drawn. A shadow moved, then another, then nothing. Minutes passed. Silence. Then a small box was found at the doorstep. Inside it, a burner phone. A single message. "Next time, we don't knock." The air turned colder, but their resolve only hardened. Rose looked at the burner, then at Marcus, her voice low but burning with fire. "They think fear will silence us. Let's show them what happens when fear meets fury." The courthouse steps were swarming by dawn. News vans, protesters, supporters, skeptics, and cameras, so many cameras. Rose stood still in the center of it all, clad in a dark gray blazer that matched the storm brewing behind her eyes. She wasn't hiding anymore. Marcus stood beside her, suit sharp, expression sharper. He had shaved, a gesture of readiness. Kyle Hollis followed, pale but resolute, gripping a thick manila envelope containing his original memo and Sylvia's corroborating files. The case was no longer a whisper, it was a bomb waiting to go off. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. The special counsel sat stone-faced. Hamilton's defense team flanked their table, sleek, well-paid, and too calm. But the gallery behind them brimmed with reporters and ordinary citizens, some of whom had lost loved ones to the very cover-ups the company orchestrated. When the gavel banged, silence fell like a curtain. "This is a preliminary hearing," the judge said, "to determine admissibility of newly presented evidence in relation to People versus Hamilton Biotech and affiliated individuals." Marcus watched the jury's expressions. A few looked skeptical, others confused. But one, an older black woman, with graying temples and sharp eyes, locked onto Rose and nodded, ever so slightly, as if saying, "I see you." Kyle was the first to testify. His voice shook at first, but as he told the story, it steadied. He detailed how his internal reports were buried, how a statistical anomaly in trials led him to discover that some batches were knowingly distributed with flawed compounds, how a company memo had used the term calculated casualties. The courtroom gasped. Rose felt her fists clench. The defense lawyer rose. "Mr. Hollis, isn't it true you were discharged from your position for erratic behavior?" "I was discharged for asking too many questions," Kyle replied. "The erratic part came later, after they made sure no one would listen." The judge allowed the files to be entered into record. Next came Sylvia, poised, cold, precise. She named names, outlined transfers, described boardroom meetings where death was weighed in spreadsheets. There were conversations, she said, about the cost of conscience. They chose profit, every time. The room sat in stunned silence. Then the defense made their move. They introduced a last-minute affidavit, allegedly from a former employee, claiming Marcus had falsified the translations and coached Sylvia into lying. Rose stood up before the judge could even ask for order. "Your Honor, we expected this." She held up a thumb drive. "This contains the full chain of custody, metadata logs, timestamps, IP addresses, all verified by an independent analyst who's sitting in this courtroom." Grace Latimer, seated in the front row, stood and nodded. "It's all clean," she said. "They're bluffing." The judge reviewed the files, took a long pause, then said, "The affidavit is dismissed as inadmissible due to compromised sourcing. The evidence stands." A murmur spread like wildfire. Hamilton's lawyers looked rattled, but Marcus knew they weren't done yet. Outside the courtroom, in the bright noon sun, reporters swarmed the steps as Rose exited. One shouted, "Miss Danvers, do you believe justice will be served?" She paused, turned to the crowd, and said into every microphone, "Justice isn't something you wait for. It's something you drag into the light, screaming if you must. We're not waiting anymore." Applause broke out from a cluster of supporters. But the threat hadn't vanished. That night, back at the cabin, a power outage hit. Not a storm, not a surge targeted. Marcus moved fast, generator on, perimeters checked. In the darkness, Rose sat with Kyle, who was visibly shaken. "They don't care if the law's catching up," he whispered. "They'll just burn it all down." "Then we make sure they can't," she said. The next morning, Rose got a call from the Attorney General's office. Not a flunky, a direct line. The voice said, "Prepare for federal indictment. It's happening." By noon, headlines exploded. Hamilton Biotech, under criminal investigation. Senators named in bribery probe. Marcus Young and Rose Danvers, whistleblowers of the decade. But Rose didn't smile. Not yet. That afternoon, she received another email, this time from the whistleblower hotline she and Marcus had helped set up weeks prior. It was from a young analyst still inside the company. The message read, "You missed one. Division 6, still running trials, overseas, a new storm, one they couldn't ignore." Marcus looked at her and asked, "You in?" Rose didn't hesitate. Always. They packed that night again. Not to run, but to finish what they'd started. This wasn't just about one company anymore. It was about a culture, a system, a wound so deep it festered in silence, but no more. As they drove into the night, Rose thought of her father, who died waiting for a medicine that was quietly pulled from the market, of the patients who trusted and the workers who stayed silent, of the ones who couldn't. "We aren't the story," she whispered to Marcus. "We're the beginning of the end of the old one." He nodded, eyes fixed ahead, and the start of something louder. In the rearview mirror, the glow of headlines faded. Ahead, the road stretched on, no map, no promise. But truth raw and rising, justice wasn't a moment. It was a movement, and they were its voice.